All right, thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. And I certainly appreciate everybody coming for this session. I now know who are the most hardcore attendees of the conference, coming after 5 o'clock on the long day. If you haven't tuned into ESG before, we are an independent analyst firm. We are like a Gartner, Forrester, one of those, except our purpose is to really help people understand what's going on and what are the trends in the market. How do you make the best sense of the technologies out there? And I just want to clarify one thing, having seen the presentations on the keynote this morning. There were more lines of code during those keynotes than I've seen at any tech conference for a long time. And I don't know if that's a good thing. I'm trying to figure that out. Like, I know that a lot of the audience is extremely technical. I have a promise for you. There will be no lines of code in my presentation. There will, however, be a lot of data. We're a very data-driven company as an analyst firm, and I'm going to just share with you data. I like to base what I'm talking about on fact, not opinion. Another good thing about being in my role is I get to really look at what's happening in the market. I really get to understand the macro trends, and that's where we're going to focus in this section. We're going to really look at how is big data getting done in the enterprise? How is Spark evolving? How is it changing? And this is not going to be looking at the Apache projects in individual detail. It's not going to be showing you how we've changed the punctuation and syntax at the command line. It's going to be looking at the market trends and really trying to understand that. So hopefully that's what you turned out for today. And I'm going to base a lot of what I'm talking about on an actual study we've done. But before I get into that, I did want to quickly say thank you to our sponsor, Databricks. One of the things I get to do that's a real joy in my job is hear over 100 vendors a year come in and talk to me about what they're doing, why they're doing it. I get to go talk to end users, people like yourselves. I get to talk to everybody in between and understand it. And this year I decided to recognize some of those people. So I did recognize Databricks as one of 20 companies in big data that I think are making a difference, changing the momentum of what's happening in the industry. So big round of applause for them for hosting this event. I think it's really great to have them here. So, introduction aside, hopefully you now know who I am, what we're going to be talking about a little bit. I want to talk very specifically about what we see happening. And I'm going to, like any good data scientist, tell you a little bit about my data set first, so you know where this has come from, what it means. We ran a study. It was 475 online surveys. So people had to qualify. It wasn't just SurveyMonkey. Anybody who wanted a $5 gift certificate could do it. Had to qualify and understand that you were responsible for your company's big data, BI, analytics, or database strategy. And you really had to be managing that, setting direction for it, understanding the tone. We looked at mid-market organizations. We looked at enterprise organizations. Data set was confined to North America, which may have skewed it a little bit, but got a good representation of different industries as well. And I just wanted to show this. Normally I don't focus that much on demographics, but I think this is good because it actually probably reflects what's actually happening in the industry. I know sitting in the back, I was in the back in the last presentation, you can't read that, so I'm going to call out what it says. It says about a quarter of the people are database administrators. That's not surprising. That was a big part of our industry for a very long time, still is a big part of it. About a quarter of it are people who are developing or managing developers in these areas of BI and analytics. And then the other half is a whole range of titles we see. There are probably people in this room who are data scientists, business analysts, data architects, data warehouse, BI or analytics managers, data analysts, data engineers. And I think that's interesting because it's showing a little bit of shift in terms of what types of roles we have in the industry. And I think by going out and asking the practitioners, it's a very defensible way, again, of crowdsourcing what's the truth out here. And you'll see a lot of vendors talking their particular point of view. Some of them got to, paid to participate, and there's nothing wrong with that. You definitely want to hear about what they're doing, but this is really well grounded in what you're seeing in the market. And again, across a pretty wide range of industries represented here, communications, healthcare, IT, oil and gas, all these different spaces you probably come from. So I said 5 myths, and by the way, if you look through the program, you'll see the number 5 shows up quite a bit. That's a marketing technique. You have to have 3 or 5 to get people's interest. I call it the Cosmo theory of marketing. You either take our sex quiz or you answer the top 3 things you didn't know and put the word myth in there somewhere. Works really well. I got this many people to come out after 5, so somehow that data-driven psychology strategy worked. But who's responsible for your big data strategy? I think this is important to understand. I know there's a lot of very technical people in the room. You might be thinking, why do I really care where it's coming from? And, is big data as a concept, is that just hype? Is this clueless executive saying, go do this, I read in Fortune magazine or Golf Digest that we should be doing big data, go do a big data strategy. Where do they get a clue? And I think that's a little bit of a myth. I think, first of all, it's derogatory to executives who actually are trying to do the right thing, invest their money in their projects in the right places. But I also think there's an element, here's an opportunity for IT departments and analyst departments to come back and take that enthusiasm. If you asked 5 years ago a CEO, hey, tell me about our data steward and how important he is to the organization, most CEOs wouldn't even know what a data steward was. I think it's actually a critical role. So coming back to that, I think it's really important to understand where these are coming from and how you can help shape them as a result. And again, I'll call it the highlights here. We asked who's initiating new projects, who's starting it out. And this changed a little bit. When I asked this question about 18 months ago, it was senior executives in line of business and senior executives IT. You expect that. They have the money. They're used to setting the goals and directions. But it shifted a little bit. It's come back towards IT taking ownership. And I think this is a good thing. You get people who hear about all the potential and get excited and they're very creative, but you really want IT to be able to manage this stuff and be able to run this stuff. So you have IT applications teams, IT infrastructure and operation teams, business analysts, data scientists. Those are 3 of the top 4 groups now running projects and setting direction. If you're in one of those groups, it's good because you get to set the criteria up front. If you're not, you should probably be influencing them, making sure this is something you can live with going forward. Because I think a lot of projects got kicked off a couple years ago without really understanding the practicality of them, the feasibility of them, and making sure that they can manage it is important. Now then you ask who's actually doing the work of deploying these solutions, and it comes to IT infrastructure and operations teams and apps teams. Again, most commonly cited, but then we get into the business analyst, data science, and then a whole range of outside expertise. And I think if you go by the jobs board here, the jobs board at Strata, you see there's not enough skills. And so finally we're getting into the game. Systems integrators, consultants, VARs, vendors, service providers, people who can help contribute some of the skills, some of the expertise, hopefully from a nonpartisan point of view. And that's really important that you also embrace that if you find your own organization doesn't have enough talent in-house, enough resource in-house. Don't be afraid to reach out and work with those groups. Now, this is my it takes a village slide. It's a little bit hard to read, but in your mind, just add blue and yellow and see what percentage of respondents say it's important for these different groups in IT to be involved. You might think this is the domain of the data scientist. It is, but it's also the domain of security, risk, and governance, database BI analytics, server virtualization, infrastructure cloud architects, networks, application storage. What's the implication of this? You can't go off on your own and do these projects and expect it to be successful at a global enterprise level if you haven't consulted these different groups, if you haven't brought them in up front to help set your expectations, set your requirements, make sure, hey, does this work for the storage group? It's kind of interesting lately. I don't know how many people have seen lately, companies like Cloudera, MapR, Hortonworks have been referred to as storage companies lately. That's kind of interesting. I'm sure it's not meant in a derogatory sense, but it's a reflection of what do other people see? Are we now intruding on other domains? Are you now running my servers? Wait, that was the domain of the server guy. Why are you, the data scientist, telling me what servers I should buy and how I should configure them? So it's important, again, you have to engage these different groups and make sure you have a message to tell them internally as you're trying to sell a project inside your company, what should we be doing? That you have something to say to each group. So that's the first piece is, who's running these? It's not just the business getting excited. IT is taking ownership. IT is reaching out for help. IT is working in a multidisciplinary way. And you should be thinking about structuring your projects to do that, to take advantage of that trend. Now the second question is, how long is it going to take for Spark to add value? Spark's a pretty young technology. Some technologies take many, many, many years before they get a lot of adoption. What we see from events like the Spark Summit here, great attendance, great enthusiasm. There's a lot of momentum here, but there's also a lot of skepticism out there. Is big data just a science project? I hate this. I was a scientist. I studied geophysics and math in college. I'm like, science project, great. All right, sign me up. I want to do science. But the rest of the business uses that as are we just wasting time and money? Is this ever going to have a practical application? And so we need to go combat that myth a little bit out there and go back to talk to the business owners, the CFO, the CEO, the head of marketing, whoever you're building this project for. Hey, look, this is going to be important to you. It may take us a little while. Let me set your expectations. But this is going to deliver actual value if we do it correctly. And so we ask people, how important is this? And you see a little disconnect here. If you look at the blue bars are relative to business priorities, the yellow bars are relative to IT priorities. How important is a big data initiative? Well, what that says is most of the time the business thinks this is their number one priority this year. Not so often IT. IT says, yeah, we got a bunch of stuff going on this year. Maybe this is one of the top 5, but it's not number 1. So there's a little mismatch in expectations there. And again, if you're working within your house as an applications developer, as a manager of data science or other types of teams, you got to be able to meet that business team's expectations. Otherwise, guess what? They're going to go around you. They're going to be like, I need this now. I'm going to go find some other way to get this done if you can't help me get this done. And that's where you see the popularity of SaaS applications or completely outsourced tools or other types of things. They go, I can't wait for IT to figure this out. I can't wait for my own data scientist DBAs to figure this out. I just got to go do it. So being able to manage that expectation of timing. And the peak of the curve when we said, how long do you think a project's going to take to actually contribute to the business? Not how long till we say, we're done, go for it, open, try it out. I almost said open for data, which my IBM friends would love, but I'm going to keep that to myself. 7 to 12 months is kind of the center of the curve here. 13 to 24 months, pretty common. So people have this expectation. We're not talking install it and this is going to be working overnight. Now, if you think you can do better than that, if you can get something up and running in less than 6 months, and there are ways to do that, go sell it. People will be like, yeah, I'm all for that. Otherwise, be a little careful. I had, I'm going to pick on SAP for a moment. I had an SAP customer be so proud that they did their conversion and their upgrade in only 3 years. And I was like, if that's good for your business, if that's a fast transition, right on. But you need to set and manage that expectation of time and not overpromise and underdeliver. Go the other way around. So if it will add value, how do we know we're setting up the right type of solution that the business is going to live with it, that you're going to be satisfying your IT stakeholders and satisfying your business stakeholders? So what matters when I'm evaluating technologies like Spark? And there's so many of them to look at. You should have some really high-level goals and priorities. I think if you come into this and say, does it support blah, 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 131, you've started at the wrong level. You need to come back and say, what really matters in terms of the qualities of the organization, what I'm delivering. So is big data really defined by volume, velocity, variety, those things? And is it really just Hadoop in a data lake? Am I talking about really just creating a big storage and repository of data that I can work with later on? Or are we going to look at this as the same way we do every other enterprise IT application? And that's really important. It has to meet the same other enterprise IT application requirements or it's not going to be seen as usable. You may have built the most incredible thing in the world, but if it only runs 1 day out of 7, and if it only goes up to a certain size and it's not secure, business isn't going to use it. And so that's really important that you're measuring yourself against traditional business things. And a lot of that is about risk. Can I bet the company on this? And so we asked people, what would you rank as most important? Guess what was number 1 on the list? Security. Number 2, performance, reliability, cost, availability, ease of integration, recoverability. These are not a lot of the things you're hearing necessarily on the keynote floor. Starting to hear more of them, starting to hear more governance and talk about that. But if you want to build a project that's acceptable to the business, you need to think about these types of factors at this level. How am I going to guarantee enough security? How am I going to guarantee enough reliability? It's not all about how fast it goes. That was number 2, but it's not all about speed, not all about scale. So that in mind, how many people here are doing Spark? Well, in this room, we have a pretty biased audience, don't we? If ever we came to Spark Summit, you're probably doing Spark. But if you ask the general market here, as we did, about 16% are already using Spark. About another 50% roughly are very interested and probably going to be doing something with it in the next year. So why are they going in that direction? Well, again, you've heard some of these things. I know Databricks did a study on this last fall. It was very good. They talked about it at the Strata. And the problem with their study was it was asking just the people in this room. People were already their customers. We asked the general market, as I said, people work with data and analytics in general. Easier to program. I want it to be in a language I know. I want to be able to do streaming. I want flexibility in terms of where it can run, Hadoop and Mesos on cloud, on-premise. I want to be able to combine it with different kinds of data sources and databases, and then some of the other adaptable functions of it, graphing analytics, SQL querying, machine learning. Faster was not number one on the list, it was bottom of the list. So when you force people to start make some choices, again, it's got to be something I can live with. And I think this is reflective of the big change in the market, is it was originally Hadoop, big data, streaming big data, machine learning, all these types of things came out and said, let's make this as powerful, as cool functionality as we can. Now it's coming back around to, let's make this something I can live with and something that'll work and fit in my environment. Now, if you ask about Hadoop implementation plans, this isn't against Spark, it's not one or the other. This chart looks almost identical to the one I had for Spark. Here, just take a mental snapshot of that. I'm going to skip back to, give or take a couple percentage points. Spark has caught up with Hadoop in a much shorter time frame. We've got about 10 years of running Hadoop. We have about 2 years of running Spark. So there's a lot of interest in that, and you should think about that not in terms of, well, do I bet my career on one or the other? Again, they're very complementary things, but you should think about it in terms of, am I building towards where the technology industry is going? And arguably, Spark has the momentum right now to continue. Now, thinking about what are people trying to do with SQL on Hadoop, what matters here? Performance, concurrency, reliability with ACID, security controls, what types of files I support, can I work with complex environments, how complete is my ANSI SQL, is it schemaless? There's a lot of different factors here as you start figuring out how do I do SQL in Hadoop-based environments, whether I'm doing Spark SQL or other types of engines here. There's so many flavors of SQL on Hadoop now. But thinking about, these are the things people are telling us that when you're doing that, that's important. And this is a little bit more technical than some of my other slides, but it starts to point out that people are reacting to what they had before. Part of the reason I think you see high performance, high concurrency at top of the list here is the first SQL on Hadoop engines maybe weren't very good at that. Now you're seeing more people trying to catch up there and deliver better value there. And they're doing that because it's important to their analysts. It's speed for using SQL, something they know on Hadoop, something they don't know, is really important. It's got to be able to work with them. And as a result, you think about how are people using these technologies against other traditional solutions, like a data warehouse. You see some changes in the market. As it starts to meet their requirements, as it starts to become acceptable for people in the different parts of the business, it shifts very rapidly. So that yellow category is probably where most people think about Hadoop and Spark versus data warehouse. That we're going to offload, we're going to optimize, we're going to complement. I don't want to throw away my Teradata investment right away because the business needs it. I want to keep my Netezza, I want to keep my Exadata. But that blue category here says about a quarter of you out there, a quarter of people working in our industry, think Hadoop could replace data warehouse soon. That's pretty aggressive. People are thinking we have that much maturity in the market now that I could actually bet a critical function like data warehousing on Hadoop, not just to offload, but to actually replace it. So I think this is showing, again, an inflection point that as this industry is better able to satisfy those traditional requirements, whether they're specific things like how fast is my SQL on this environment, or general things like how recoverable, how available, how secure is it, if you can start to satisfy those other groups, satisfy your storage team, your networking team, your security team, then you start to get success and you can say, actually, maybe we can throw away that traditional data warehouse. Maybe we don't have to be paying $10 million a year to that vendor, and instead I could spend $1 million and build myself an equivalently functional environment that also is set up for the future and growth, more flexible, all those reasons people might be looking at Spark and Hadoop in the first place from a technical quality point of view. But that shows real actual disruption starting to happen, and that shows that the big vendors in this space are going to have to also adapt. It's not going to change overnight. You're not going to see Teradata shut down tomorrow and say, hey, we're going just Hadoop or something. But showing that you can provide the same quality as something that's been mission critical, that's evolved over 30 years of technology development, with something that's evolved over 10 years or 2 years. If you can prove that and the economics work, then you're going to be in a really good position to move forward and actually change the way your business conducts its business. So, number 4, does open source matter? No. A lot of people think, well, maybe open source is a great element for collaboration, innovation, and building confidence. We need all these people to rally together, get to know each other. We may have big differences, but we're going to develop the best possible solution working all together. So that's one view on whether or not open source matters in our industry. I think the bigger truth here is Yeah, it's pretty much right on. People have to be able to work together. We have to work and develop together and collaborate and innovate and build confidence. So you have to stick with your friends in this industry. If you go too far off that open source path, even if you're a genius and can make it work, someday you might leave your company, and then where will they be? Even if you think, I am going to build myself the best possible compatibility matrix of every component within Apache open source and figure out how they can all fit together and upgrade every 2 weeks and retest the n-by-n matrix of version levels as they come out. Yeah, I had a Hadoop vendor brag to me the other day. They showed me their compatibility matrix and look how many versions we've tested and can support. And I said, that's a nightmare. Who wants to have to deal with that? So let's figure out how do we get the best of open source without having it be so fragmented that it's too hard to do. Now, when you ask people, if you're going to choose a Hadoop or Spark distribution, is it important? Well, you see 54% say it's critical, 41% say it's only very important. Everybody wants it to be open source. This may not be the top criteria by which they pick a platform, but make sure your vendor is participating in this space. Make sure they're giving back. Make sure they're supporting it. That's absolutely important because you don't want to get yourself down a dead end, get yourself locked. And taking that one step further, the Open Data Platform Initiative, ODPI, in partnership with companies Hortonworks, GE, IBM, Pivotal, EMC, a bunch of others participating in that. You ask them, is this important? 85% say that's important, that my vendors have that. And I think that's, again, about the confidence. Are we building a market that's sustainable? Is it going to be something I know I can have swap from one vendor to another? Can I swap my application without causing problems? Do I have a stable core? Do I have enough people invested in this? Is it going to grow even if there's 300 companies doing big data, even if in 2 years only 100 of those are the same companies, and others have come in and some have closed and some have been acquired. So knowing that you have that confidence, I think, is a big part of it. This is interesting, though, because arguably ODPI hasn't proven its value yet. It's a great concept. It's very logically sound that making things standardized, working together as vendors, makes it easier for consumers of our technology and easier for application developers to link to it. But there's a strong belief that this is the right direction to be going as an industry. So looking towards that. I'm not saying you shouldn't work with Cloudera or MapR. Please don't stand up and say Nick said that. But showing that a lot of people believe in these directions and these partnerships, even though a lot of them are co-opetition. That's really important that we continue to do that as an industry. And so that reflects in how people are deploying their big data environments. We have about a quarter of people saying, I want to do purely open source. If I can't download Apache and compile it myself and tweak it, then I don't want it. Those are the purists. We have about 35% going the other way, saying, I really want a big vendor to support me. I want it to be one of the traditional vendors. I want to go with Cloudera, MapR, Hortonworks, IBM, somebody like that I know and trust. They are leading in their space. They have a lot of engineers dedicated to this, like 24/7. But then you see the biggest category is actually a hybrid. I think I have a typo in there. This is a hybrid approach. I just coined that term. I'm not sure what it means, but it's like a dragon with a bunch of heads coming around. But anyway, I'm going to do some commercial stuff, and I'm going to do some open source. I'm going to mix and match as I need to, but I have that confidence that I can do it, that the core is sound, that I can make it go where I need to go and still be able to support it. And so that kind of leads us to our last piece is, if I'm going to go down this road, I know who needs to be involved. I know how I'm going to get it approved. I know what technical priorities I should have in terms of qualities for the environment. I know whether or not it should be linked to open source efforts, but where should I do it? And that's kind of the last big question is, is big data best done on-premise, commodity servers, running open source software? Is this something where I should really just go buy myself a whole rack of Dells or HPs or white label servers and stick it out there? Is that the right way to do it? And it's interesting, this is the conventional wisdom right now, I think. For an industry that's only been around for a few years, it's kind of funny that we have such rigid conventional wisdom. I think there are a lot of different ways you can build a big data environment. And I think it's going to evolve in a lot of different directions, and that includes the cloud. This is not here is one best environment, one best infrastructure in which we can do this. Where are we going to continue to go? How is this going to change and evolve if you believe in different options and kind of keep testing the assumptions we have here? And so when you ask people, where do you plan to deploy your big data in the future? for net new projects, I'm not saying people are going to pick up what they have or burn down what they have and start fresh. But for new projects, we have about a third of people saying I want to be on-premise with dedicated kit. That's the traditional Hadoop model. You have about a quarter of people say I want to be on-premise, but I'm going to share the environments a little bit. I'm going to have some virtualization in there. I'm going to be able to swap resources, maybe shared storage on the back end. That's interesting because that's a little bit against the conventional wisdom. You have almost a quarter of people saying I want a pre-built appliance. I want an engineered system, if you like that term better. I want a converged system. I want something that's already been built up specifically for this, bundled with this. I might argue that this is the traditional data warehouse guys again. Like if I'm used to running an Exadata and this big stack of stuff, maybe I like an Oracle Big Data Appliance. If I'm used to running a Teradata data warehouse and I want something that complements and offloads it, maybe having like a UDA or a Hortonworks or a Cloudera-based appliance from Teradata fits nicely with it. But only about 20% of people are actually looking at cloud environments right now as the primary going forward. 6% looking at truly hybrid. So when you think about cloud, it may not be primary, but people are certainly considering it. In fact, top of the list here for consideration amongst cloud is Spark. And I need to apologize here to Databricks because I talked to them a year ago and said, your business model's hosed. Nobody's ever going to want to do big data in the clouds. It's just too expensive. Why would they go with you? It doesn't make any sense. So there's my apology publicly to Databricks. Actually, they seem to have a lot of momentum. Others are going this way too. IBM I'll call out here with their cloud data services. Maybe they weren't the first to market in doing this. Amazon, obviously making huge pushes around cloud-based big data and solutions. But you can see Spark, databases, data warehouse, analytics, BI, Hadoop. Everybody's considering, is this the right choice going forward? And I'm just going to quickly touch on some of the advantages and disadvantages because I think there's some interesting contrasts. One of the number one reasons people are looking at cloud, they think it could be better security than they have on-premise. Interesting. Okay. Cloud provider, maybe they really know how to do it. Number 4 is better availability. And then faster time to value. My data source is already being in the cloud. Faster time to deploy, things you might expect. Bottom of the list is, by the way, pay as you go, which is funny because a lot of people think about cloud's advantage being, well, I'm only paying for what I'm using. But when you force people to make a choice, that's not really it. Security, time to value, availability, that's where my data is. Flip it on its head, disadvantages. I'm worried about security. Okay, so there's 2 camps there. Some people, cloud-based security is best. Some people, I'd rather do it on-premise. But then costs come in as 2 and 3 concerns. If I get into cloud, what's this going to cost me down the road? And again, it's the top of mind. Databricks Community Edition. Hey, you get a free hit. Go try it out. Easy to do. Once you start loading up with a petabyte of data, how easy is it going to be to move out of? And what's that going to cost you long term? And I think that's one of the concerns people still have about cloud. So looking at how will people do it, about a third of people want to do infrastructure as a service. About a third want to do PaaS. About a quarter want to do application SaaS level. And 10% only want the fully hosted solution like an Altascale or Rackspace or something that's actively managed, a Capgemini cloud sort of example. So a lot of different things to think about in there. What I really wanted to do was, at the end of the day, I know you've been buried in technical specifications of different Apache projects and different vendors' codes and different functional feature type stuff. I want to just bring it back up at this high level here and give you a feeling for how is the market thinking about it, what's going to make you most successful communicating it internally, what are the priorities you need to keep kind of coming back to as your touch zones. It's got to be secure, it's got to be affordable, it's got to be high performance then after that and those types of things. So if you think this was interesting, come by up, ask questions. I know I ran a little over time and I'm between you and drinks and dinner and that sort of thing now. So maybe I'll just take questions at the edge of the stage. Come check us out on ESG. I'm on the Twitters at Enruta. So feel free to follow me. I tend to live tweet these types of events and lots of other thoughts and commentary. But hopefully this was a useful session. Anyway, thank you very much for your time. Have a good afternoon.